In some of the most surprising, some would even say shocking, and some would say confusing news we've seen in the NHL for a long time. Johnny Gaudreau, of course, we know, signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets. But why was Columbus his choice? It seems to be a hot topic here with the Devils, the Flyers, the Islanders, and of course his former team, the Flames, all in the mix. Why did he make his choice? We'll discuss the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today I want to talk a little bit further about Johnny Gaudreau and his decision to go to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Many people were blown away and surprised by his decision to sign with the Blue Jackets. Pretty much nobody's seen it coming. All the NHL insiders were mainly reporting all the teams much closer to what the area he grew up in, whether it be the Flyers, the Devils, the Islanders. It was only a little bit before, I think, Bob McKenzie was the first one who was kind of like what we call the Bob Father, so to speak, of NHL insiders, the original insider. Mentioned Columbus a few hours before it happened. He said just another team to keep an eye on. Didn't sound too serious, but if Bob McKenzie saying it, I must hold some weight, and boom, it happened. It's just a very surprising twist and turn that, caught everybody by surprise. So we've now had a chance to kind of digest this for a few days. Johnny Gaudreau has been officially introduced by the Columbus Blue Jackets to the media. Has time to do numerous interviews. I've seen him talk on SiriusXM, NHL Network. He's been on Sportsnet. Obviously talked to Columbus media. And we kind of have, I'm not sure we have all the answers, but we do have a much better feel, I think, as to why things worked out the way they did. We've also had NHL insiders like Elliotte Friedman have a chance to do a lot of digging over the past couple of days and reveal what he thinks on the situation. So let's go through why Columbus. Now let's first though go why not the other teams. The Calgary Flames, where he's played his entire career up to this point, been in the organization over a decade, drafted there, signed there out of college, was one of the all-time greatest players in franchise history, and had he had a chance to consider making that choice to stay, he easily would have went down, more than likely, as possibly being the all-time greatest Flame. It would have been legendary status. I have no doubts if he would have continued to play at the level that he did. Now, of course, he basically made it known at the beginning of the season that even last summer that they weren't really going to talk negotiations. They kind of wanted to let things ride. They were not going to make any comments publicly. And that was that. So, looking back now, was that a red flag for the Calgary Flames? It's been rumored for years that when he had a chance to leave and head home, that he was going to. And that ended up basically kind of happening here. Ultimately, a lot of those people who thought that, maybe they were onto something. But at the end of the day, negotiations didn't take place. The Flames seemed okay with it. Of course, because of where they were in the standings and everything like that, they were going for what they hoped to be a long playoff run. It made no sense to trade him, and here we are. They actually negotiated back and forth. They exchanged offers and counter offers. So you hope and you think that, genuinely he was considering staying. But Elliotte Friedman points out that once that season's over and those negotiations are kind of starting, and then once he, after everything's wrapped up and he finally makes it back home, things look and feel different. He has a chance to think about things. He's obviously married. He has a wife to consider. Their first child is on the way. All these other things that, factor into a personal choice. You have a personal and professional life. But you have to wonder, though, that when he notifies Brad Treliving, basically at the 11th hour, the evening before free agency kicks off, I'm not coming back to Calgary. I hope for his sake that he was negotiating in good faith and did have, a real genuine point that he was considering going back. Because if that was done and kind of led them astray, that's obviously done in poor taste. It's one thing to leave. You can respect that, though, and how it's done. And I think a lot of Flames fans would handle things differently in certain situations. Like, for example, if I could have a chance to offer any advice, as I would have made this decision sooner if I were him and notified the Flames sooner, so they would have had a chance to pivot. Because if you really care about the organization and the state of everything, being a top player, you're going to have a major impact, whether you're there or not. Make your decision a little bit faster so they have a chance to make other moves to kind of replace you best they can or whatever. and not so they can not miss out on other chances here, right? So that, you can kind of be more upfront, so to speak. And that didn't happen. So ultimately, I understand why Flames fans feel betrayed. But at the same time, you got to remember, and I know it's hard, he earned the right to make his own choice. This is not personal against anybody specifically. There's obviously, though, things that tells me that he didn't feel was best for his family in Calgary, for him personally or family-wise. What those things are, we don't know. There's speculation that maybe he didn't enjoy the scrutiny of the media, because in any hockey market in Canada, you're heavily scrutinized. You're dealing with a lot of media all the time. It's not for everybody. Some people don't like that kind of pressure. Obviously, maybe he didn't really enjoy playing for Daryl Sutter. We don't really know. I think it's fair to say Daryl helped him become a better hockey player. Had one of his greatest seasons underneath him as a coach. So I don't know if we can really say that that's, likely. Maybe, though, we don't really know. We know he got along great with many of his teammates. There didn't seem to be any issues that way. Obviously, if he's going to be a father now, maybe he thinks he's better for his child to be born and raised in the United States than Canada. I don't know. Those are all personal things that I don't really think there's one that's right or wrong from the other. It's personal choice. So at the end of the day, we know that he chose not to go to Calgary before he ever knew where he was going. So the choice to not go to the Flames was made out of what he basically either didn't like or wanted different. I think that's fair to say, because we know going into this that choice was made before anything else was lined up. So that's why the Flames were out. It's not really a clear-cut answer. I didn't like this, didn't like that, but it's as good as we're probably going to get. I can't imagine Johnny Gaudreau at some point is going to sit down and do an interview and be like, well, I hated this, I hated that, I don't like this. I just don't see that happening. Don't see it at all. So that's that. That's what we know. Now, Elliot Friedman points out in the 32 Thoughts podcast that his feeling, based on what his knowledge is around the NHL, and he's well connected to all the variety of teams, that Philadelphia Flyers were by far his first choice. So why did not work out? The Flyers are a team he cheered for growing up. Would love to wear the orange and get on the ice to represent Philly. And it did not happen either. So why was Philly not the choice? Well, ultimately, Philadelphia looks like made that choice for him. They ultimately were not really in on Johnny Gaudreau. When Chuck Fletcher made the statement after he did his media availability at the end of the first day of free agency, when asked, were you in on the Johnny Gaudreau free agency sweepstakes, he said, no, we weren't. And that appears to be the absolute truth. They were not. And it's because they couldn't be. They had no cap space to offer anything close to what he would be entertaining. So, but of course, that is their own problem. They were trying. They were trying really hard to move other things. They had a lot of players on the market to be traded. There's no doubt. When they said that they wanted to do this aggressive retool, when you seen Dave Scott and Chuck Fletcher do that press conference before, back a couple months ago, they said, Dave Scott said he's going to give Chuck a blank check, and that, and Fletcher said that they're going to be making some changes. Aggressive retool was, I believe, a terminology that they use. We didn't see any of that. But to be honest, I'm not really sure. It's not because of lack of effort. But the problem here is that the Flyers had such a bad season last year that a lot of their players just don't have value. And other teams were not about to help them out and just take on salary because Philly needs help. That's not generally how it goes. So obviously, in that scenario, it sounded like they were trying to make moves. The prices were really high. They wanted to clear some space, and they couldn't do it. So as much as Johnny Gaudreau was basically served up to them on a silver platter, and really, to be honest, they should have known for the last couple of years that this was a really good chance of happening. And they said it's been rumored that he wanted to go home and play for the Flyers for a long time. So for them to be in a prime spot to make him an addition, they should have been working on that, in my opinion, in the last few years to be ready, to pounce and to add him as a piece to help get them over the hump. But instead, this team has been floundering and being one of the most inconsistent up and down teams of the NHL for the past decade. And it's been mismanaged, in my opinion. And Chuck Fletcher, I could go into that as a whole other can of worms. I'm not really fond of his, body of work in Philly. I think he's done a terrible job and should probably be out of a job, but he's still there. And they also, according to Friedman, come to the conclusion that we're more than a Johnny Gaudreau piece away from being way more competitive and having a chance to be a top playoff team and have any chance at a Stanley Cup. We're probably 4 or 5 good pieces away. And if we sign Johnny Gaudreau to this mega long-term contract, it's going to eat up a lot of cap space. It's going to put on handcuffs to be able to do other things. Probably not a terrible point. They're definitely multiple pieces away. But Johnny Gaudreau definitely makes you a lot better hockey player. Johnny Gaudreau definitely helps you sell a lot more hockey tickets. And, there's a lot of things to like there. And if you were smarter about how your roster was constructed the few years leading into this possibility, it could have been much better, but they failed. So ultimately, they were never really in it. So Philly gets the big X. They could have been a marriage made in heaven, and ultimately, they screwed it up. But like I said, they have other issues to worry about there besides whether or not Johnny Gaudreau was on the roster, in my opinion. Now, you get the New York Islanders, also apparently really high on his list, but according to Friedman, was never really in it, not real seriously, not like we made it sound. In the beginning, it was kind of like, you heard that there could be a third team. We knew the Flyers basically were, like, I know I've talked about it on the channel here, a lot of other hockey people have too, saying like the Flyers, there's definitely interest. There's no doubt they're in the mix per se, but unless you see the Flyers make a couple of trades, it ain't going to happen, right? When you see them do the buyout for Oscar Lindblom, like, okay, maybe this is the beginning, but then nothing else followed. So like, okay, well, you knew they weren't in it without seeing any trades first. So the fact that they didn't make it happen, not nearly as surprising. The New York Islanders, on the other hand, were rumored to be very interested. We know that Lou wants to add a scoring winger for Matthew Barzal, a major need on the team. And this team is coming off very much a down season. But like I said, I honestly think that they could get a couple of moves here and be right back in the mix. But we haven't seen those moves. Gaudreau would have been perfect for them. There's a few other wingers around the league that I think would be great for them too. But you know what? This was a chance to get a free agent where you don't have to give up assets. But I honestly, based on what I heard, it doesn't sound like they were super aggressive over going after Johnny. It sounded like the offer wasn't as high as we had heard through NHL insiders. There was rumors out there that he was offered over $10 million from the Islanders and the Devils. And now it sounds like were not completely accurate. Sounds like the offer was probably closer to $9 million. But I don't know that they were really like pushing as hard. And I don't know that Johnny Gaudreau really ever seriously really had them that high on his list and really was going to consider it. I mean, it sounds to me like there's probably things on Long Island that might be comparable to Calgary that he might not have been fond of. Not to say that the lifestyle can't be good, family could be good, it's not too far from home. I think there's lots of positives there for Johnny. But at the same time, you got to admit, Lou Lamoriello he's a 2-time GM of the year. He's going to be a legendary manager of this game and always go down as being one of the greats. But as he's getting older and things are changing here at the league, like, the last year or so, you could certainly be a lot more critical of his work. And now when it's really crunch time, this team really needs a little bit more surgery, a little bit and now he's gone quiet and, So, but you also know that Lou was extremely old school, extremely strict. You got to wonder if Gaudreau's thinking, like, if I sign a big contract there, are they going to be more critical of me, more harsh on me? And you know what? Those are all fair questions. And to be honest, I think teams and fans have every right to be when you're making that kind of money. But again, a lot of players do not like that. Sometimes they don't handle the pressure. They look at it as more of just a job. It just so happen to be a hockey player. Right? Some people love the spotlight, others don't. It's just that simple. And I think we're kind of going on an assumption here because we don't know this for sure. But based on what Friedman was saying, based on what I've heard, that kind of sounds like, I just don't know that he really ever seriously considered that. Okay, so then that takes us to the Devils. The Devils were reportedly now in on this too. Tom Fitzgerald, the GM, confirmed it 100%. He said, yes, we were in on it. He chose to go in a different direction, so we've moved on. Fair statement. We know for sure they were in the mix, negotiations. New Jersey would have been pretty darn close to being home as well. Why not go there? The offer sounded pretty lucrative. A chance to play with some young top players like Hughes and Heischer. They got Dougie Hamilton on the back end. They got, some changes in goal right now. Like, there's lots to like about the Devils' future. They have a really good group of young players there. So why wouldn't Johnny Gaudreau want to make that consideration? Well, we don't really know why he chose not New Jersey, but I will say this, and it made sense listening to a few others say it as well, is if he grew up being a Flyers fan, can you imagine, some players have this thing, and you got to understand it. If you think about it as a fan right now, let's say you're a Flyers fan, can you picture yourself ever cheering for New Jersey? Probably not, right? Like, they're like, you look at some of the team's top rivals, and you're taught and you kind of have programmed to automatically hate those teams. Your biggest enemies, your biggest rivals. It's hard to make that jump, right? So maybe that was a factor in New Jersey and why he didn't go there. Because I honestly do think that New Jersey probably could have offered him a lot of other things that he will like. I don't think New Jersey doesn't get quite the spotlight that a team like Philly does, or the New York teams, for example. You can fly under the radar a little bit more than some of those other areas, but again, and then listening to Johnny talk himself, obviously, like, to me, I think we don't have a clear cut. That's the best answer we can kind of give as to why those other teams were out. But why Columbus? Well, what did Columbus have that they don't? Couple of things. For one, listening to Johnny talk in his interviews, he made mention that he always had Columbus under consideration, and even though he said, you want to be close to home, but sometimes you want to be close but not too close, right? Obviously, you want to be able to see family quickly, but sometimes you don't want them living next door to you, so to speak. I get that. I completely understand. Even though Columbus might be a long drive, it's an hour flight. You can get back and forth very quickly. So, you're still living on the eastern side of the United States. You're way closer to home than Western Canada. So there is that. So even, maybe we should have, I think a lot of people might have been too critical on him for saying he didn't go home. Theoretically, yes, you're right. He didn't go home, but he's a lot closer to home. And like he said, he can be close to home, but not too close. So there's that. The other thing is you got John Davidson and Jarmo Kekalainen in Columbus, who obviously did a really good job of selling him on why he should go there. Something that obviously Lou Lamoriello and Tommy Fitzgerald did not do, right? So, like I said, especially in the case of the Islanders, they've had a hard time. When's the last time that you remember like a big free agent signing? Right, exactly. So, they've made, like, Lou's done well with trades, but when a player is traded, they don't really have a choice. Like, when Lou has his guys, like a lot of GMs do, like, he traded for and signed Palmieri. But of course, he was used to Lou in New Jersey, and there was a previous relationship there. Like I said, for some guys it works, many others it doesn't. But that's just the way it goes, right? But they got Pajot. Well, that was via trade. Did he sign right away? Sure, but he just, not to say that he couldn't fit in there, but he signed after being traded. They offered him what he wanted that Ottawa wasn't going to give him. He was happy to take that. Seen a team on the rise. Made sense, right? For some players, they don't really care about all those other things. It just depends. But when it comes to Columbus, I have to think that John Davidson, who's a very influential, charismatic man who can really sell you, he could probably sell anything to anybody, right? So I think they did a really good job of selling Columbus. We know that Johnny said he talked to a lot of current and former players on what it's like to live there, the lifestyle. Got major endorsements. I know Cam Atkinson, a good friend of his, who's now a Flyer, who he'd probably love to play with, heavily endorsed going to Columbus. He's a fan of living there. Lots of guys did. So I don't know who all he talked to, but, you hear all these great things. You're like, okay. But Columbus is, not a big market. It's a good market. I don't really think anybody should really talk bad about Columbus when it comes to the market there. They have a great fan base. They have a good arena. It's not a huge city compared to some, but it seems to be, from all accounts. I haven't been there. I can't speak for it specifically, but everything I've heard is nothing but good things. It's not, again, some people don't want that glitzy glamour, profile high lifestyle you're going to get in like New York, LA, Toronto, etc. Right? Johnny Gaudreau appears to be a pretty quiet guy, wants to fly under the radar, he wants to go to work, do his job, a blue-collar guy. That's a blue-collar town from what I've heard. You know, he's not going to have media in his face all the time. He can probably go out in public and, yeah, he'll have some fans, but it's not going to be like it would be in other places. You know, they have some good young talent there that they're accumulating. You know, they have, you know, you got your Cole Cylinders, your Kent Johnsons, your Chinnikovs, and then, of course, you got your young defenseman that you just brought in recently between your Werenski that just signed a mega long-term deal and your Boakfist. You got a couple of good young goaltenders. You got Patrick Laine, Jake Voracek. You know, like they didn't have a good year last year, and they're kind of rebuilding, so to speak. But they could look what the New York Rangers did. They brought in Artemi Panarin. What did they do? They greatly accelerated that rebuild. He could be a big part of that solution. He knows that. I don't know that winning a Stanley Cup is the most important thing to Johnny Gaudreau. I think, like I said, he wants to be paid appropriately. I think he wants to go to work every day, do his job, and be able to go home in peace and quiet and not deal with the media. To me, that's the kind of person he appears to be. That's the opinion, at least, that I have formed on this guy. And I don't think we really should be disrespecting that anyway. I know it hurts for Flames fans because of how things went down. Like I said, the main advice and things I would have done different if I were him was to make that decision sooner and make it known so that they could be in a better spot to deal with it and explain yourself a little bit better so that it's more understandable to the fans. And then for those other teams, well, I don't know that as much as we all want to be critical of the GMs that didn't get the player, ultimately, like, to some degree, you got to wonder, like, you know, Philly's a different story, but, like, did the Devils and the Islanders really stand a good chance? It's hard to say. I'm not sure that they really did. So Columbus it is. They, you know, it's one of those crazy things. So as much as it's hard to understand, it's hard to wrap your mind around. Nobody's seen it coming, but none of us know what Johnny Gaudreau thinks privately and feels privately, and that's his business, right? So at the end of the day, he made his choice. It's good for Columbus. Like, you see, not only that, but you see a guy like Claude Giroux going home to Ottawa. It's nice to see smaller markets get some of these big names and show that, you know what, we can attract a big time player to come here. It's good for those markets to grow. It's good for the fan base. It's good for their ticket sales. It's good for the entire league to see that higher profile players spread out. So from that perspective, strictly as a hockey fan, just of the league in general, it is good. Obviously, like I said, I understand if you're a Flames fan, you can't look at this in a positive way right now, and for the most part, and I get that. Trust me, I'm a Senators fan. I know what it's like to see all your favorite players leave town. I know how much it hurts. And I've programmed myself over the years to not get attached to players anymore because it's just not worth it in the end when they leave, and it's hard to take, right? So that's my opinion on why Columbus, based on what we've seen and heard so far. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. We'll discuss further. And of course, stay tuned to the channel. There'll be lots more videos coming to take care of all the latest news on NHL free agency and the rest of the offseason here. So again, subscribe if you're new and stick around for more news, and I'll catch you next time.